Welcome to the Missing Ingredient Podcast with CJ Bruce, where food and beverage founders, operators, and experts share the real strategies behind building successful brands. Let's jump into today's show.
Hey, I'm CJ Bruce, and welcome to the show. This is the podcast for founders and leaders of high-impact food and beverage brands who are serious about scaling. Each episode, I sit down with people who power the food and beverage industry, brand operators, agencies, vendors, creators, and retailers, to uncomplicate the strategies that take brands from early traction to serious scale. This episode is sponsored by The Missing Ingredient, a food and beverage marketing agency with over a decade in the industry. We take a different approach, starting with your business goals, looking at the full picture, and building a marketing strategy that actually ties back to growth. From content and performance marketing to influencer partnerships and AI-powered workflows, we're an extension of your team, not just another vendor. Learn more at themissingingredient.com. Today, I'm talking with Jeff Smith, CEO and co-founder of JS2PR. Jeff is a branding and communications executive with more than 30 years of experience leading corporate communications, media relations, crisis management, and integrated marketing strategies. Throughout his career, he helped develop, launch, and elevate some of the nation's best-known consumer brands, including Starbucks, Jamba Juice, Arclight Cinemas, and Whole Foods Market. Jeff is a results-driven leader and mentor who lives by the JS2PR maxim, WIT, whatever it takes. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Hey, Jay. Good to see you.
That's very impressive, by the way. I like your intro. Not my intro, but your intro.
Well, thank you. Been working on it, trying to get my podcast intros down.
Congratulations.
Thanks. So I wanted to start with something we have in common. So we have worked together before. We worked on Splendor Water for a few years together, which was a great partnership. And we both focus on the food and beverage space. And so I know when you first started your agency, right, you're really a generalist firm, and you decided to focus on food, beverage, and hospitality. We also started a little more general, and we've been focusing on the space. So I'm just curious, what drove the decision for you, and how have you really, institutionalized that food and beverage knowledge across your team?
Sure, great question. Yeah, I founded this company 25 years ago after selling my first agency, which was an agency based in New York. I ran the West Coast division. That agency was the agency of record for Starbucks Coffee, which you mentioned is part of my intro. And our responsibility was to take and grow Starbucks across the country. When we started with them, we opened their very first location in New York City. And they, at the time, only had one location in DC and one in Chicago. And with no national presence, they asked us to be their agency of record. We said, yeah, we can do that. And, 8 years later, we had grown Starbucks across the United States and Canada. And we sold that business. And when I started this business in 2001, I had come from more of an entertainment background, mostly television, home entertainment, celebrity PR. And then in the years that I was working with the agency in New York, I got much more into food and beverage. We launched Starbucks across the country, as I mentioned, but we launched Jamba Juice, which was a direct result of my relationship with Starbucks and Howard Schultz. And so when we started the agency, it seemed at the time to be a good idea to declare ourselves a generalist agency. So back in 2001, we had a handful of clients that were food and beverage focused and also entertainment focused. We had a couple of home entertainment divisions from studios. Remember those before streaming? And we had some health and wellness clients and even a financial client. And over the years, we sort of grew that. We really leaned into our food and beverage experience. My business partner at the time, Jill Sandin, who's the other JS and JS2PR, she's since retired. She had a deep background in restaurant PR. And over the years, we grew and launched a lot of restaurants and chefs and food products. And so about 10 years ago, we decided to pivot and focus exclusively in food and beverage for a couple of reasons. One, being based in LA, there is so much creativity happening in Los Angeles in the restaurant scene. And still now, although we've had our struggles recently with a lot of outside factors like COVID and the entertainment strikes and fires and things like that. But there's a lot of creativity, a lot of resourcing available, and we decided that LA was just a great place to grow that kind of business. And then, of course, with the experience we had, we decided to dive a little deeper into that. And then along the way, we'd also launched some consumer brands, some consumer packaged goods in the food and beverage space. And that was a space we were really comfortable in. We love the space, and it made it a little easier with that new business funnel to focus exclusively in food and beverage. Whereas before, as a generalist agency, we were always trying to fit the proverbial square peg into round holes and figuring out how can we do this account? Who do we have on the team who has the experience? Now, during the past 10 years, we've got people who are really wildly into food. They know the food business, they know the community, and we love what we do and we're good at it. So, that's why we have focused exclusively in that space.
Awesome. That's great. Yeah, definitely similarities there, and just the, starting broad and focusing in, and love the, the core love of food at the center of all of it. And also, how just you get to eat the products that your clients make. That's a nice little bonus.
Yeah, we get paid to enjoy these meals, and we get paid to really, drink a lot and eat a lot, basically.
Not a bad gig. Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. I think so. Digging into the work a little bit here. So looking at your website case studies, and there's a case study around Shake Shack. And I think one of the things that's interesting on the PR perspective is around, unpaid influencer activations, right? And how do you get influencers to really post about your brand and your product? I think drove over 1 million impressions from that case study. And so I'm curious, are there any learnings from that or any other examples around, earned influencer posting that would apply to, food and beverage brands looking to drive some of that organic advocacy?
Sure. And, this is evolving every day. A couple of years ago when we launched Shake Shack's location in Santa Monica, things were slightly different. You had a little bit more control over organic, unpaid influencers. It's clear when you're paying an influencer, you've got a lot of control over the content, over the messaging, over the timing. With an unpaid influencer, you're attracting them with the offer of a meal or an experience in a restaurant or an experience with a new product. And you hope that it's exciting enough. And Shake Shack was exciting enough for them to. We also had a collab with Benny Blanco at the time, so that really helped. We hope that will be enough to attract them to come in, and then we lay all the messaging on them and work really closely with them about what we're looking for. But again, we don't have full control over it. But what we like about organic influencers is that, and again, unpaid influencers, for the most part, they tend to be unpaid. We're having to find more and more budget as we move along, as we evolve. I mean, that's just sort of the reality these days. You've got to come up with some budget. But we find that their audiences are much more hyper engaged in what we're doing. And we find that we get a lot more bang for the buck with them. To be certain, we do work with paid influencers all the time. They tend to be much more structured campaigns with bigger budgets, obviously. And there's certainly a place for them. And we love working with the paid influencers. It's a little bit more complicated, but again, you get more control over that. But we do like those unpaid organic influencers, and we tend to continue to cultivate those relationships in Los Angeles, Southern California, throughout California, really, in the other markets we work in, Las Vegas, New York, Chicago, Miami, and other places. So, yeah, I think universally, I think it's still accepted that if you work with a really good, organic, unpaid influencer with the right audience, you can get a lot out of that relationship, not to mention the content.
Yeah, nice. And I guess a follow-up question there, curious about, you've been in PR for a long time, working with influencers as well. And do you see any parallels in, building relationships with editors or contributors and working with influencers? Or curious, like, your thoughts on, is the approach the same there? Are there differences that are interesting, or things that, brands can think about as they're trying to build these relationships?
Yeah, that's such a good question. It's an informed question too, because these days there are so many journalists who are themselves influencers, actually.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of graying of the lines, and we love working with them. There are a lot of LA Times editors and writers we work with, for example, in some of the lifestyle magazines like Los Angeles Magazine, Food and Wine, Bon Appetit. They have their own social media following, so you're kind of getting two for one. I think the approach is still a little different. The earned media landscape has really evolved, and it's really disparate now. It's been fractured a lot because of the death of the sort of hard in your hand magazines and newspapers. So we're working with a lot more freelancers these days, and the freelancers tend to cover a lot of beats within the food and beverage industry. They may be super hyper focused on wine, or they may be hyper focused on organic or vegan, and they are contributing to a lot of different media outlets. And it's the same thing with influencers. Particularly going back to the unpaid organic influencers, they tend to be hyper focused on real niche areas within food and beverage. And so there's a similarity in that regard too. Obviously, with earned media, and when you're working with an editor or a producer or a writer or freelancer, what you're getting in return is the earned media aspect, the sort of third party endorsement that you get out of that kind of relationship. With an influencer, it's obviously their point of view, and that's different. That's very different in a lot of ways, I think, in terms of the outcome and the ROI that our clients are getting. But I think most of our clients are understanding and have understood for a few years now that it's got to be a healthy mix of the two. You've got to have a lot of good influencer input and contribution. And of course, you need that earned media still. But then the fringe benefit is, as I said, a lot of those media now are themselves influencers, and we love that.
Interesting. Oh, that's super interesting. You mentioned ROI, and I think the next topic I wanted to dig into is measuring results with PR. Can take some time and all of that, and I'm sure you get the question, right? How do you drive results? How do we know that it's working? So I'm curious, today, how do you think about PR driving measurable results, and what are if there are like specific metrics or just the framework, and how do you go beyond? We got some press and it worked. How do you think about that?
The number one question and the most difficult question. 35 years of answering that question and tacking from one answer to another, depending on where we were in the trajectory of the history of earned media, right? And it's interesting that you asked that question, because we're in the middle of updating our website right now and adding some more FAQs. And one of the questions is, how do you measure ROI on traditional earned media? And, there are a lot of factors involved in that. It's about the quality of the publication and their audience. It's about the message that's being delivered in the piece. It's about the eyeballs on it. We can quantify it and we can qualify it. The quantifying part of it is easy. We can measure the eyeballs and we can measure the clicks and all of that. The qualifying is a little different. Believe it or not, we still have clients who want to know the ad value of the earned media. And for your audience who may not know what that is, it's a calculation that tells you what that article would have cost you as an advertisement, which is completely archaic and has no relevance whatsoever today to today's PR and marketing reality. But some of those bean counters at some of those big companies, they want it, so we give it to them. Anyway, it's not really relevant to the question, because it's not how we measure ROI on earned media at all. But we want to look at, the quality of the content that's been delivered in the piece. I just had a conversation with a client the other day who received a lovely feature article on Eater LA. It's a new restaurant that's opened. And, Eater LA, like a lot of media outlets, has been evolving as they go. They become really scrappy. I really like their style. They've got some editors who go out and get their own content, and we actually have some beautiful professional food and beverage shots content that we created ourselves for this client. But Eater published their own photos, which were beautiful, I thought. But the client questioned why they didn't use the shots that we had. So in fact, we were sort of talking about the ROI on that piece, and for him, I think he would have preferred to have more control over the content. But I said in this case, we just didn't have that in hand. And as a matter of fact, I thought it was better that the Eater ran with their own photos. It just seemed a little bit more organic and heartfelt and I don't know, sincere in its tone. And so we had that conversation. So that's another component of how we measure ROI.
Interesting. And with, in thinking about results, like if somebody, new clients coming on board, you're having conversation, how do you kind of manage expectations on how long things take, on the earned side and, reaching out and pitching or story timing or any of that? Like, how do you think about when would people expect to see results from PR if they're, starting up?
Another FAQ question that we've been working on lately. So really timely. Nice. Good question. It really kind of depends on what we're doing. If we're launching a restaurant or a product, we can anticipate a certain rash of early press. Once we've launched, we normally expect that there are the usual suspects who will come through for us and give us some earned media placement around that in, I'd say, call it 12 to 15 different media outlets, depending on the market. Same thing with consumer packaged goods, food and beverage products. We can expect a certain amount of that. But then the real work begins and you've got to build on that. And managing expectations for the timing of earned media really breaks down to the kind of publication you're talking about. Broadcast, local broadcast can happen in a couple of weeks, depending on who you're working with. National publications, the rule still holds that a lot of those lead times are 3 to 6 months to see something come out in print and or online, in a Forbes or Forbes is a little different. They work a little quicker, but in a Bon Appetit or Entrepreneur magazine or something like that. So it really depends on that. And then you've got the sort of the middle players, and depending on what's happening, what's trending, how soon we can get a reporter, an author, a journalist into the restaurant or to try the product. It's all contingent upon their timing and what they're working on with their editors or producers at the time. So, but it's sort of like a early lead, mid lead, and long lead approach. And, our job is to keep on feeding that and continuing to generate the heat. So we're continuing to get press. But for an opening or a launch, you could expect, I should back up. We normally start working with a client 6 to 8 weeks out from their launch of whatever it is. And so, we tend to hold back on a big push in PR, except maybe an announcement, which will be usually pitched as an exclusive to like an Eater or an LA Times, depending on what it is. And then once we fulfilled our obligation to that exclusive, then no holds barred, we can go out and get as much press as we want or can. We want a lot of press. It's whether or not we can get it.
Yeah.
I mean, we all want to get a lot of press. We only have so much control over that.
Yeah. It's helpful context and framing and thinking about the different tiers and different press hitting at different times or taking different times to do that. I think this is a good transition to my next question. That's around, so you mentioned, the initial press with a product launch or a new opening. So curious, once you get past the initial launch and also if someone's launching something new, how do you consistently manufacture story hooks, like things that would be interesting to press? How do you approach that? Are there categories you think about to do that? And curious your process there.
We always work 3 to 6 months out. We're already working, for instance, on Mother's Day, and we'll be working on graduation, and we'll be working on Father's Day, and we're already ramping up for spring and summer pitches. We look at several things. One is food trends. What's trending in, this is where we become the eyes and ears for our clients. And we consider ourselves experts in the food and beverage industry. So we keep our ear to the ground and we know what's trending from, flavor profile point of view or ingredients or whatever it is. And we work closely with our clients to make sure that their team, their chef is leaning into those trends so that we've got something timely to pitch from a trend point of view. And that's becoming more and more relevant and important for social media as well as earned media. And then we look at seasonality. As I mentioned, we look at all the major holidays. Every single food group has its own national food day. There's National Restaurant,
National Food Days,
National Margarita Day. And, our clients roll their eyes. We roll our eyes a little bit, but in fact, that's an opportunity. We want to, because God forbid, a roundup article should come out in a local publication that mentions 6 restaurants that are serving, let's call it chocolate, right? National Chocolate Day, some fabulous, chocolate decadent dessert, and our clients not represented, right? So we got to make sure that we're on top of that kind of thing. And then we look at, other traditional things that you would look at, any news that's coming out of the restaurant, new menu changes, new chefs, new team members, anything new. New is what sells. It has always sold. It hasn't changed. Anything new is what we look for. Milestones, anniversaries, that kind of thing. And then we capitalize on that press and try to grow it. So, we don't want Sunset Magazine to cover our clients just once. We'd love for them to cover them multiple times, and we'd love to get a feature story, and then we'd love to be in a roundup, and we'd like to be in an ingredient mention or something like that. The whole challenge there is to make sure that we're getting our clients in front of those journalists all the time, so they're using the information we're giving them on in their coverage on a consistent basis. And those are all the things we look at in order to make that happen. And that fills our calendar. And then we've got all the opportunistic things that come our way. We've got, we frequently have calls from editors saying, hey, I'm working on a story about, summer fruit, pit fruit. Who do you have that has, give me 3 of your clients that are serving that kind of thing on the menu. And, which is a great thing for us. It's just a big benefit of having those kinds of deep relationships with the media, that they're coming to us for those kinds of stories. We call them opportunistic stories because they're coming to us, and we're always feeding those machines too.
Yeah, interesting. And just some quick timing note for anybody listening that we're recording this in late March. So Jeff's talking about the kind of lead time toward the upcoming holidays with Mother's Day and Father's Day and all of that, just to get a sense of the timing there. I think another question I had related to this, so, in the pitching, when you're, you mentioned the approach there and your relationships, I'm curious, what inputs do you require from a brand? Like if a brand, consumer packaged goods, food and beverage brand, they're looking to, initiate an engagement like this, what would they be, what kind of homework would they do that would make it, more effective for you and help you kind of do your work better? So that could be around, product details, the news, right? Things that are coming up, customer insights, like what else comes up in that?
Yeah, the most important thing in our first conversation and our kickoff meeting is we want to understand what their goals are for the brand or for the restaurant. And they all have different goals. I mean, it could be a standalone restaurant that's looking just to open that restaurant and be successful in that community. But we've just recently opened a restaurant, and they're their first restaurant, and they're looking to scale that restaurant. So that's going to require a different kind of approach. So the very first thing and the most important thing is to understand what their goals are as a brand. And then, we need them to share all of their assets with us, all of their, content. We really do a deep dive into the genesis of the brand, the backstory of the brand or the restaurant, figure out where they're coming from, and begin to craft a strategy around that, and then to put a timeline against that strategy. So we're looking for all kinds of things. We actually get, quite deep with our clients about their backgrounds, and their desires. We prompt them to give us, their 10 top media placements. What's your dream media placement for this? If you have an influencer that you would love to cover your product or restaurant, who are they? How can we get to them? And then it's really the getting to know, right? And so what the homework that they need to do before they engage us has already been done, because they've launched they're about to launch, and they've built their brand. So their homework is their life experience and what they bring to that brand, and sharing that.
That's good.
Yeah.
Nice. That's good. Okay. So the next question is, I'm obsessed with AI. It's something that we're pushing heavily into at the Missing Ingredient, and it's affecting all aspects of business in many, many ways. So I'm curious, to hear from you from the PR perspective, and feel free to take this question in different directions, but general framing, what do you think in an AI age, as there's more and more content being pushed out and produced in so many different ways? What do you think becomes more valuable about PR, and what becomes less valuable, and how you kind of see that evolving as the speed of AI and where we currently are?
Well, great question. We have been talking about this, obviously, like everyone has, for a couple of years now. We haven't really yet seen a direct impact of AI on our relationships with the media or influencers. Fortunately, if you want to be an influencer these days, you've got to be a real person. For the most part, the influencers that we're dealing with, who are physically showing up in the space and enjoying the experience, right? From a work point of view, we encourage our team to use AI effectively and smartly. Certainly, we don't allow any kind of AI writing. I mean, it's too dangerous. First of all, I think it's really important that younger people learn how to write, but it's too easily spotted. I think people are really savvy these days about seeing through it. We believe in a one person approach. So each individual pitch goes out to individual journalists and individual influencers. We don't do email blasts, and we sparingly use press releases, but only for big news. And so we haven't yet encountered a situation where we were working with a journalist who turned out to be, AI. I don't know that how much, its impact on journalism, I'm sure, will come around and affect us at some point. We just haven't seen that yet. We work with traditional media outlets for the most part, and there are so many of them, and we just haven't yet seen the effect. But what I'm anticipating in the next 5 years is that we will begin to encounter those, and we'll have to tack internally. And I think the industry is going to have to tack and figure out a way to lean even more into the authenticity that you get with working with a real person, a real producer, a real influencer, a real brand collaborator, a real, editor who's actually doing the work and creating that authentic experience. Because I don't think at this point AI has gotten anywhere near the point where it can live up to the high expectations that my clients have from a messaging point of view and from a replicating the experience point of view. I just don't think it's there yet. I think it's an industry that I think it's still early stages, but I'm not naive enough to think that it won't evolve to a place that it will begin to actually have some benefit to the industry. And so we've got to keep our eyes out and keep on, experimenting and working and studying and observing.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I think, a couple of things that, just to pick up on things you said there, I think two things that, come to my mind that we've been seeing, curious to get your thoughts on. One is, as, more and more AI and as more, artificial experiences, you could say, that there's this return to IRL, right? To in real life. People want to see people, they want to be around people, they want to do things. I also saw, obviously a lot of this coming out post-COVID. It's okay, we want to have in-person experiences. And so and I think there's a connection there with PR and events and, launches or releases or that kind of thing. And then the other piece that's a little more tactical is with, people are using AI to get information about products, right, or restaurants, and how do you show up in there? And I've seen some early indications, and if you haven't seen this or not, that's okay. I'm just kind of curious from the PR perspective, where getting some press mentions and being in PR actually helps you show up in those. Obviously, PR has been an SEO driver helper, but read some things and seen some things around it being even more of an AI search engine or a generative engine, answer engine, all the different terms people are using to help you, get recommended by AI. And have you seen anything around that at all yet?
We have actually, we've been sort of upping our digital marketing relationships with agencies like yours. So we can actually offer more advice, because I think people, okay, let me back up a half step. When I interview people for a position at my firm, one of the first questions I ask them is where they get their restaurant news. If they want to go out to a restaurant, they've got mom and dad coming in from out of town, and they're coming into LA. How do you find a restaurant? And, back in the old days, they were actually looking at articles in newspapers and magazines and things like that. And then more recently, they were going to, Eater and other sites like that, Thrillist and more sort of trending, easily digested content like that. And they're still doing that. But obviously, everyone's using ChatGPT, for instance, for everything right now. So that SEO part and that sort of the content part of that from an AI perspective is really important, and how our clients are taking what we do and repurposing it on their websites and then their social media, and how we're working with their digital teams to make sure that it's optimizing their whole world, online world, so that those searches are populating with their products and restaurants. And that's where the digital piece comes in. But I love the point that you made about in-person experience, IRL. I think we've seen from just a societal point of view that there are a lot of reasons for that. From a trend point of view, the 90s seems to be trending right now. The sort of last, analog experience that a lot of people had before, everyone had something in their hand that was connecting them to their worlds. I think there's a nostalgia part of that, but I think for the younger generations, I think there's something, I think from a mental health perspective, I think they're really leaning into that and embracing that. I don't know how long that'll last. I don't know or how long it can last, but it's something we've got to pay particular attention to with our clients as it relates to searches and AI.
Interesting. Definitely a fast evolving space. I'm sure we could have a follow-up in 6 months and things will be totally different. Some will say the same.
Yeah.
All right. I got one last question, but before I ask it, I want to make sure, point people to your website. So js2pr.com. And Jeff, is there anywhere else you recommend people learn more about you and the work you're doing?
On Instagram, our Instagram at js2pr. We would love for the people to visit our website, look at our content, look at our experience, and check us out. And then if you're interested, to set up a meeting with me, and I'd love to talk to you. I love working with people who are launching food and beverage brands and restaurants. It's a special, as you know, CJ, it's a special kind of person who does that. And I love hanging with them. So, and I've had some great experiences over my life and over the years. And so really appreciate this opportunity and pointing more eyes and searches in our direction.
Awesome. Great. Appreciate that, Jeff. Wow. So last question, and then we'll close out. So just before a brand hires a PR firm, curious if there are, a few things, you kind of touched on this before, but what are those things that they should have in place, and kind of ready before hiring a PR firm, like that you would recommend to kind of maximize the value of that relationship?
Yeah, number one, you've really got to know who you are and, why are you doing what you're doing? I think for a restaurant, you should have a space. You should have a good idea of a timeline of construction. And you should have a menu and a chef. And, I think having those exploratory conversations with people like me, with people like you, before they get into all of that is really important. I think they shouldn't want or need to pull the trigger on activating a relationship with an agency until they've got all of those things in place. They've got an opening date. They're pretty secure about that. And they've got some sort of, the why behind what they're doing. And before they come to me with a product, they should, have become manufacturing the product and really understand how much of the product they can produce in any given time, because it could be really tricky with consumer packaged good. If it's a scrappy startup and they're actually manufacturing still in their house, you don't want a big article to land in the New York Times that's going to suddenly cause so much awareness that they won't be able to fulfill the orders. And we've seen that before. Reminds me of we launched Jamba Juice, and Kirk Perrin, who was the founder, told me when we started the relationship, he said, he had like 15 stores at the time. They were called Juice Club, and then he transitioned the name to Jamba Juice. And then Jamba Juice was born. And he said, look, I don't really want any national press until we've scaled this brand into a couple of different states. But pretty early on, we had an opportunity with the New York Times. And that begat a full page article on the front page of the Saturday food and beverage. It was maybe the lifestyle section, with a great big color photo of the Jamba Juice cup. They just started producing color copy, the New York Times. And that kind of blew things open for him. And in that case, it was a good thing, because that created awareness and then anticipation of Jamba Juice in markets that he would eventually grow into. And same thing we did with Starbucks. At a certain point, we always knew there would be a turning point in that relationship when people would ask themselves, is there a Starbucks in my neighborhood? To where in my neighborhood is the Starbucks? And that happened. And now, of course, how many
Everywhere
do you need in your neighborhood? So, I'm sorry to segue on that, but that timing piece is really, really important from a awareness and demand point of view.
Yeah, no, that's great. Awesome. Well, that's great, Jeff. So we've been talking to Jeff Smith, CEO and co-founder of JS2PR. Definitely check out their website, check out their Instagram. And Jeff, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks, CJ. It was fun. I really enjoyed it. Thank you. Good to see you.
Thanks for listening to the Missing Ingredient podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.